Hello everyone, this is Marshall Official. Today we're going to be looking at all the recent updates for the front lines and the political updates for the Russo-Ukrainian war that happened over the last couple of days. So we're going to get right on into it. We actually have a lot of very major updates from the last couple of days, so we're going to get right on into it. We'll start here in the Kursk region. Russian forces, first of all, have been able to completely push the Ukrainians out of the second incursion they made over here. They made a little one right here, and they made a bigger one right here. However, now the Russian forces have been able to completely push them back out. At one point, the Ukrainians were able to push into Vesele up here at some point. But since then, we can see here how the Russian forces have been able to push them back out from all directions, and now the Russian forces have pushed right back to the border. So, as of right now, things have returned back to normal on this part of the front line, unless Russian forces have any intention of continuing to make a small incursion into Ukraine, perhaps, but it doesn't seem likely. So, this part of the front line has now returned back to normal. Moving on to the larger front of Kursk itself, we see here Russian forces continue to make significant gains on this part of the front line. Russian forces have been able to recapture Lubimovka, as well as, and they are now fighting over Tolsty Lug, and they've also taken a little bit of ground right here. There are unconfirmed reports, however, that Russian forces have been able to push and capture Viktorovka and Stary Sorochina. Russian forces did advance, and this was confirmed, to capture Novaya Sorochina right here. Russian forces did push and capture this area. However, oh, and they also captured this big patch of forest up here as well. But there are unconfirmed reports Russian forces have been able to capture something like this, and also something like this, leaving only this tiny little area here in the middle. Oh, sorry, this should be behind that. There you go. Something like this, and then something like this, leaving only this tiny village and a gap in between them for all these Ukrainian forces located up here. So it's possible the Russian forces might be on the verge of encircling a bunch of Ukrainian forces. However, that does remain unconfirmed. What is confirmed are these advancements that you see right here. This was confirmed. And I did expand the gray zone at least fairly significantly to at least acknowledge that there is a gray zone / Russian advancements on this part of the front line that we probably have not yet seen. So that is... And we do have this Russian advancement down here. They recaptured the village of Cherkasky Konopelka. I did hear that things are probably going to start slowing down this part of the front line, however, just because we are now entering what is known as the Rasputitsa. I mentioned it in a previous video. Basically, the Rasputitsa is come October / November, before the ground freezes in the harsh winter. It's basically nothing but a sea of mud, basically, and then things will start. We're already starting to see that across the front line. So it's getting colder. It's starting to get colder. The Rasputitsa is here. It's probably raining a lot, and the Rasputitsa is on its way, basically. And if it's not already here, so things are going to start to slow down at least until the ground freezes. But we do still see Russian advances continuing across this front. In general, Ukraine has lost a huge amount of the territory they once controlled. They've lost actually probably the majority of it at this point. And the Ukrainian forces now really only hold on to a certain key positions. Mostly the Ukrainian forces have this to rely on. This area right here is what they really can rely on at this point. Everything else beyond this is probably going to fall back to Russia in due time. But anyways, let's move on from this part of the front line. That's all just speculation. So let's now move on to what we do know. We have a small little Ukrainian advancement right here. Not much, but just a little right here. They capture this part of the forest right here, northeast of Lipsy. Not much there. We have nothing from the Volchansk direction, as usual. Moving to the Pishane direction / the Kolesnivka direction, Russian forces were able to reach and cut this road in going from Kolesnikivka down to Kryakivka. I'm obviously butchering those names. I apologize, but I'm just, not my language. At this point, Russian forces are now only 0.8 miles away from reaching the Osyol River at this point, so they are about to cut this front into two between the Kupiansk direction and the Borova direction. Russian forces have also managed to make a small advancement right here, and they've almost captured the entirety of the small town of Vishniva. Moving on from that part of the front line, we have a few more changes going on across the front line from the last couple of days. Russian forces advanced along the border between Luhansk and Donetsk right here. They also captured these two tree lines right here. In general, we are now seeing how Russian forces have because they've reached the Zerbiets River right here, they are now pushing southward. Wrong thing. They are now pushing southward along this road, and we'll start seeing Russian forces pushing down along this road, most likely, while also pushing from the east to the west as well. So Russian forces are going to continue this operation until they've captured pretty much the entirety of everything to the east of these reservoirs and the Zeribets River in general. So until Russian forces capture something like this, they're not going to stop pushing in this area. Moving on from that part of the front line, we move now to the Seversk part of the front line. There were previously unconfirmed reports that Russian forces were able to capture the entirety of Verkhnyo-Kamyansky. That report turned out to be false. But what was true is it was this Russian advancement to the north of it, where they captured the majority of this hill to the north of Verkhnyo-Kamyansky, which means by capturing this, Verkhnyo-Kamyansky might actually fall in the near future. However, it still remains too early to talk about a collapse of the Seversk front, even though Russian forces are now just, at this point, from this direction, Russian forces are now only around 3 miles away from reaching Seversk. So it is still too early to talk about a major Russian offensive onto Seversk or the collapse of this front line. Although we are seeing changes on this front line on an every so often basis. The Ukrainian forces here are clearly some of the best because they've been simply performing excellently and defending this territory. Although we are starting to see some pretty significant changes. The Ukrainian forces abandoning Rivka, it's now in the gray zone, and abandoning all this territory to the east of it. That was very significant, but other than that, just not much is happening on this part of the front line, except for the occasional Russian advancement. The Ukrainian forces actually managed to recently recapture Ivano-Darivka. So, in other words, this front, although active, is not in any way collapsing, or we can't expect a major change on this front line, at least not yet. If it does happen in the near future, we will obviously know when it does happen. All right, we now move on to the Chasiv front line. This is we do have major changes from this part of the front line. I thought this front was quiet, or even not dead, but I thought this front was calming down. But no, it suddenly exploded over the last couple of days. Just today, Russian forces were able to cross the canal majorly. Well, they already crossed the canal, but they've crossed it in force, and they raised their flag over this area, over this building right here. You can there's a geolocated video of that. You can see how they raised the flag over this building. And then the camera pans to the left, so you can see all this, whatever the heck this stuff is, this white stuff and this gray stuff. It's shown in the video. Russian forces were able to capture an area of about 1.3 square miles here and about 299 acres right here. If Russian forces continue this advancement, they'll be able to push around the city to the rear of the city like this, and they are advancing somewhat north, slowly, but it is happening. They capture a little piece of the forest right here. They also captured a piece of the forest right here, and they also advanced inside the city itself. Another geolocation right there for that one. If this continues, eventually Russian forces will begin to encircle the city, and if this happens at that point, Ukrainian forces will either have to again do what they did in Bakhmut and just go all in and just sacrifice everything to try and defend the city, or retreat. Retreating would be a hard decision to make for the Ukrainians, because you can just look how insane this terrain around Chasiv is. Kind of ridiculous. I mean, we have these white patches. I don't even know what these are. These white patches. It's like rough looking ground. All these forest patches. We have several lakes and lakes and other ponds of water, whatever you want to call them. So we have water. We have forest. We have crazy terrain like this down here. Lots of highways. It's a good number of highways. There is a railway right here. So, and it's also high ground. Chasiv is I believe the highest place in Donetsk. So this is a significant place for the Ukrainians to hold on to. They do not want to give this up. But if it starts getting circled, they may consider it. We have seen that play out time after time again down here on the Pokrovsk front. By the way, we do have major changes down here as well. We'll get to that in just a second. But just to finish up the Chasiv front line, there we have a small advancement up here in Rivka, and this small one in the forest, and this smaller one right here in the set, capturing about two blocks of the city on the eastern/middle part of it, if you count this as being eastern Chasiv Yar. And this is the big news right here. We only have one small advance from the Leonidivka front. Russian forces were able to capture a few more buildings right here, so in this part of the tree line in the highway right here. No, not much to talk about right there, but it it did happen, so worth mentioning. Moving on from that, we now move on to the Pokrovsk/Kharkova front. And we do have major changes around Seladove. Ukrainian forces are able to recapture pretty much the entirety of the city, even push Russian forces away from the Terrakon, at least out of the main part of the Terrakon. So the Ukrainian forces were attacking they just launched an all-out counterattack, and they were able to recapture pretty much the entirety of Seladove. So actually, I would say the entirety of Seladove is now back under Ukrainian control. However, Russian forces advanced to the north of Seladove and captured this trailer right here, and as well as capturing whatever that thing is. They also advanced along the highway, along the E50 highway, trying to push up to this area right here, where there is what appears to be. That's a road. No, I was going to say that's a road. No, that's a road. There is another road right here. So they're trying to push this intersection right here. And Russian forces are also advancing along the railway right here, capturing fairly significant pieces of ground. They also advance along this tree line right here. So they're advancing westward from this area right here, pushing west, and also pushing along the railway right here. Pair that with their advancements up here, and Russian forces are clearly trying to encircle Seldovia. And at this point, if we zoom out, it's starting to develop. This encirclement is starting to develop in Russia's favor right here, as we see them pushing around the city from the north and the south. If this gets much further, let's say if the Russian forces reach up to right about here around this intersection, and the Russian forces are able to reach up to about here, the Ukrainian forces at that point will pretty much have to get out or just fight to the death, just like in Chasiv Yar. Seladove is very, I should say, I don't know why I said not, is extremely important, because if Seladove falls, Pokrovsk will at that point be the next main target on this part of the front line. They already captured Horodivka, they already captured Novoprokopivka. Seladove is the last thing standing in their way. Once Seladove falls, it completely opens the way for this southern attack on the Pokrovsk from the southwestern direction. Mainly because it opens the path to all these little railways and these roads all over the place that lead into Pokrovsk from the western direction. There is of course the eastern direction, this main railway right here. But other than that, the only ways that Russian forces can easily make it to the city would be through pushing through Leningrad first and then going west, or just by following this railway right here. But there is a much more significant option. They could also open up so many more possibilities to attack by taking Seladove, and then they can push along this highway, push along this railway, push along this railway, push along this railway. They just keep on advancing westward. But that is the situation for Seladove. That's why Seladove is so important. That's why the Ukrainians are fighting so hard to take Seladove, and they seem to have misjudged the Russian plan, if you will, because they suddenly launched this big attack and recaptured most of the city, but now they're starting to be encircled inside the city. So it's developing rapidly. We'll see what happens over the next couple of days. On top of that, Russian forces were able to capture this tree line right here to the west of Russo-Ukrainian. In general, they are starting to push along this railway. However, Ukrainian reinforcements did arrive to this part of the front line right here. I think it was like 2 brigades arrived here. So that obviously will help slow down the Russian advancement. The Russian forces also were able to capture this tree line right here. They're trying to split these two. They're trying to cut off Hernik from Novoseladivka. Other than that, we now have one more major advancement by the Russian forces. They were able to capture the entirety of Maksymilianivka in one day. We do have geolocated footage that will be shown right now. That is Russian forces declaring that they had in fact captured Maksymilianivka. And with that, Russian forces the next thing for the Russian forces to reach is Kurkova itself. Kurkova will be the next thing to be hit by the Russian forces. And also, now that Maksymilianivka has fallen, this is a big danger for all of the Ukrainian forces located in this area. There's just wide open fields with nothing else. Because the next town is not until you get all the way down here, which is also being pressed by the Russians. So all these fields will probably, I don't want to say fall to Russia, because Russia is not really known for pushing through open fields like that. But the Ukrainians are not in any way safe in these fields without Maksymilianivka now. So without Maksymilianivka, the Ukrainians are just wide open targets in this field. So we'll have to see what happens. Moving on from that, we do have more Russian advancements down here. They advanced and pushed into Katerinivka itself, capturing this eastern part of it. They also captured several tree lines and squares down here. Pretty big territory. That's about 2.88 square miles. They also captured another piece of ground right here, including this little cluster of buildings right there. In general, that's about 1.22 square miles right there of advancements. So that is fairly significant. And they also captured this big chunk of ground to the south of Zolota Niva. In general, we see Russian forces are trying to advance along this highway to reach Veliki Novosilke, and we also have pretty considerable Russian advancements here to the west of Veliki Novosilke, after they captured Lavadny, they captured some more ground. It's possible the Russian forces are trying to advance along the border between Donetsk and Zaporizhia to reach this oblast up here, which I believe is the I believe this oblast is the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. If Russian forces, by the way, this oblast is absolutely massive. Like, it is an enormous oblast. But the point is that Russian forces can reach this oblast of Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. It will be mostly symbolic in the sense that they have reached a new oblast beyond just the bordering ones, the ones that they're already in. So that it won't mean much to just capture this little corner of the oblast, like like right here. But just entering a new oblast would be a major political win for Russia. And with that, that is now your entire map update. Well, let's now quickly go over the political updates before we end off this video. Okay, so starting off right now, we see that according to Zelensky, the victory plan is a bridge to a successful peace summit. Zelensky presented the main points at the meeting of the European Council. So Zelensky's more and more about his peace plan. That's your first thing right here. We do have several big things that happened over the last couple of days about North Korea. There was actually news about North Korea sending troops to Ukraine. There was news about Russian forces training Ukrainian troops for Ukraine over in far eastern Russia. So that's obviously heating up. I'm not sure if that's entirely true yet, but it was reported that there are North Koreans being sent to Ukraine to fight. That Russia was training North Koreans in eastern Russia, and that North Koreans were sending troops to Ukraine. We'll see how if there's more if proof about that comes out in the near future. We here see that says North Korea is doubling its weapons production to meet the military needs of the Russian Federation in the war against Ukraine. North Korea is obviously kind of a crap nation. Obviously, their GDP is abysmal compared to South Korea, for example. But they do have a fairly significant / sophisticated weapons production system, or weapons production complex, military complex, if you will. But it does mainly center around artillery shells. That is probably the one thing that North Korea stands out in is its production of artillery and artillery shells. It does actually do that quite well, and that obviously is exactly what Russia wants. They want as much artillery to just pound Ukraine as possible to advance, help wear down the Ukrainians even more. So that is fairly significant that North Korea is openly saying that we're going to double our weapons for Russia. North Korea officially declared South Korea a hostile state and enshrined it in its constitution. Yeah, things are also heating up between North and South Korea. I just saw an article the other day about South Korea flew drones over North Korea and dropped leaflets over North Korea to try and get the North Koreans to hate the government. Basically, it was like what what Chamberlain did to Germany in 1939. They used bombers to drop leaflets over Germany, anti-war leaflets, to try and get the German people to say, we don't want war. Obviously, that failed miserably, but that's what South Korea just did to North Korea. They brought in drones and dropped these leaflets on North Korea to try and get North Koreans to not like the government, to rise up against their government. North Korea responded by blowing something up, they blew something up in the street or something like that. It wasn't entirely clear what they meant by that, but in other words, things are heating up in between North and South Korea. So just putting that out there. It is happening. Here we see a full list was released of the weapons included in today's $425 million U.S. package for Ukraine. That includes additional munitions for NASAMS, Stinger missiles, 155 millimeter, 105 millimeter artillery ammo, Tau missiles, javelins, Humvees, and the usual. There's more than that, but that's like the big ones, the things you expect. There's also grenades and stuff like that, small arms. Okay, moving on from that, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz announced his readiness for negotiations with Vladimir Putin on a just peace in Ukraine. So Germany, as I mentioned before, is Ukraine's second biggest supporter in this war, militarily at least. And German Chancellor Scholz, he's really pulling it back. Like he's not giving them missiles. He's refusing to give Ukraine missiles. He won't lift bans on them using their weapons against Russia. And he's, in general, really, he went from being, all in for Ukraine to saying let's negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Like that's a big shift. That's a huge shift from all about Ukraine to let's talk to Putin about this. That's a big shift. And I think, and I have to say, this is a speculation, but I'm going to say the German election is next year. And I'm going to go on a limb here and say that he's doing this because he wants to get reelected. And right now, it's looking horrible for him in Germany. Like his party, the was it the SDP or SPU party, something like that? Let me look it up. SPD, sorry, SPD party in Germany, which is Social Democratic Party. Sometimes some people call it a Socialist Liberal Party. That's a nickname for it. But that party, their numbers are abysmally low. And there's also a new political faction. I think it's literally just called the left, something like that in Germany. That they're doing even better than the moderate left, which is the Social Democratic Party. They're doing even better than them. In other words, his party is so low, it's insane. It went from being the biggest party in Germany to being one of the virtually the lowest. At least out of the parties that matter, at least it's the lowest. But and on top of that, the new party that's now way ahead, it's the highest, it's skyrocketing in Germany, is what was previously Merkel's party, the Christian Democratic Union. Some people call it the Christian Conservative Party. They're now they've skyrocketed. They're at the top now by a huge margin. They're at the top. But and more frighteningly for Germany, or more major for Germany, is the fact that the AfD party, the Alternative for Germany party, which is considered to be Germany's official or their new far-right party, they're second place now in Germany. That has not happened before at any point. In fact, Germany, ever since World War II, has become more and more left-wing. Every year, it's more left-wing, more left-wing, more left-wing. Germany has literally completely just turned it around since World War II. They've gone from being a far-right party or a far-right country to being one of the most liberal countries in the entire world. But this next election, next year, might completely turn Germany around, completely undo everything that happened over the last 70-something years. And just completely undo all of it. There's a chance the AfD party might win this election. They just won I believe it was the governor elections in Thüringen, and they were second place, I believe, in Chasiv. So they just won their first elections for governors. And now they're going to go for president. And even if they don't win, the party that will win is what was previously Merkel's party, which is also a right-wing party, just not as right-wing. It's a middle right. It's a conservative party. So the conservative party is almost guaranteed to win this election and win it massively. Like they're going to win in a landslide. And then right behind them will be the far-right party, which will outdo all their left-wing parties. I've been talking for a while on this, but I should really make a video on what's going on in Germany just in general. But the point is that major political shifts are happening in Germany, and those right-wing factions do not want to help Ukraine. But Olaf Scholz, who's the Socialist Democrat Party, he wants to get reelected, and he knows he ain't not getting reelected if he keeps this up. So he's got to try and cater towards this new right-wing rise in Germany if he wants to get reelected. So that's a lot of talking for that one, but let's move on from that. We only have a few more things to go. Let's just get over with. According to Mark Rutte, NATO has no evidence of North Korea's military participation in the Ukrainian war. Again, maybe they are, maybe they're not. North Korea is definitely helping Russia. Are they sending troops to Ukraine? That's a different story. We'll see about that one. The Netherlands once again declared that they give Ukraine the go-ahead to use the delivered F-16s for self-defense, including military strikes on targets in Russia. So the Netherlands will support Ukraine using F-16s against Russia itself. And that's the last thing. So that's gonna be all for today. So thank you guys for coming by. That's your whole update. That's your map update. That is your political update. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, hit the bell notification to keep these videos coming. Really appreciate it. Really helps me a lot. It's 100% free. Doesn't cost you a thing. You can always go back and undo if you want to. And with that, guys, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.